Welcome to the last of 2025. We have one announcement, and that is last time last year, if you've paid your membership, put up your hand. And I got complaints. Oh, I know. Well, I was going to tomorrow, and you asked me a day too early. So let me just remind you, memberships are due, and Peter Ginn will be happy to receive them. I'd invite Duncan
those gentlemen well.
to introduce the speaker.
Well, good evening, and thank you for coming tonight to our last lecture of the 2025 series. My name is Duncan McDowell, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce our speaker, Warren Everett. In contemplating this lecture, I came to me that there's something that probably all of us have in common. Medals as mementos, as talisman of our relatives, those who have improved themselves through serving, but also we recognize them as people who have done something beyond their own self-interest in serving their country and serving an ideal. And I would, not just by way of illustrating this, above my desk I keep my father's medals from World War II and my mother's medals from World War II, and they remind me of what I find so wonderful about them. They serve their country. Well, in this spirit, we have Warren to talk to us tonight about medals in the 19th century context, but they have been around, I think, as we'll find, for a long time. Warren finished a 30-year career with the RCAF in 1996 and moved to Kingston and has been very busy in the years since then. He has been an active community volunteer with such things as the United Way, the Doors Open annual celebration of our architecture, St. George Cathedral, and for his sins, he has been the president of the Kingston Historical Society once. Out of his military career, he has brought forward a keen interest in military history and played a central part in the national movement to get a monument in France to the 1917 victory by Canadian troops at Hill 70. And that ambition was realized a few years ago and now rivals, I would think, Vimy as a place of remembrance for Canadians. Beyond that, he has also been interested in collecting medals and military photographs as a kind of interested hobby that reflects his own interests. So with that in mind, I'll ask Warren to join us and tell us more about medals.
Well, welcome everyone here and in Zoom land, and thank you, Duncan, for that wonderful introduction. For my sins, I've been president twice.
Bad things come in threes, you know.
Well, last week was Remembrance Day, and I think we all witnessed those young people and old people wearing medals, proudly wearing those medals, both them and serving. And each of those medals has a story behind it and the history as well. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. All right, so last week was Remembrance Day, and we probably saw all those young vets and old vets and serving members wearing their medals very proudly. And I think you probably would ask, what are those medals for and what do they mean? Well, that's my theme tonight, collecting medals, collecting history through medals. Every medal contains a story and a thread of history, but we won't go into too much depth. But, initially, I decided not to go through a litany of medals. So first slide up, that's the first slide. Of course, you have to have a title slide whenever you do a lecture or a presentation. And this one is collecting medals through history. Now, I just want you to have a look at these. These are not my medals, but this gives you a sense of the breadth of medal collecting and how many there are. And we'd be here all night if we went through most of them. So tonight, we're just going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about two 19th century medals and their connections to Kingston and to Canada. Next slide, please. Now, until this medal came out, the Waterloo medal in after 1815, the rank and file were largely ignored for medals. A victory by commanders, they received knighthoods, money, all sorts of recognition, but the people in the trenches did not. So after the Battle of Waterloo, with the encouragement of Parliament in Wellington, they came out with the Waterloo medal. And this was the first medal issued to every soldier from private to general. It was also a medal that set the template for future medals, and it was unique in the sense that it was named. So now we knew who the medal belonged to. Now, just having a look at it, the standard medal then has a ribbon, distinctive ribbon with a brooch fitting to pin to the uniform, a suspension to connect the ribbon to the medal, and in this case, the naming as well. So a medal offers I got to keep here, don't I? So a medal offers a narrative. It tells the story of the person, tells the story of the battle, and it tells the story of the threads of history that were involved. So our first example is the Crimean Medal to Captain Robert Mole of the 82nd Regiment of Foot. The medal has a distinctive ribbon, as we talked about. It has a very elaborate suspension that connects the ribbon to the medal, and it also, of course, is named on the side. This was a medal that Queen Victoria took a very personal interest in. In fact, she pressed so hard for it that it was almost issued before the campaign was over. Next slide. This is a picture of her in London handing out medals. You notice the person in the forefront is in a very elaborate wheelchair. But she was dead keen on this medal and wanted to make sure that all the people got it. So when the first group medals were given out, they weren't named because of the hurry to get them out. They were asked to send them back in, but the people who received the medals decided they didn't want to send them back because they might not get back the one that she touched to get them. Yeah. Okay, there's nothing like a map when you're talking about military campaigns. And this one shows the peninsula, the Crimean Peninsula, where most of the battles took place. They were in Alma, Inkerman, Balaclava, and Sebastopol. This is an area all too familiar to everybody today because the same wars are happening there as they did 150 years ago. Okay, the Crimean War was basically a war between England, France, Sardinia, and Turkey against Russia. The cause of the war was the collapse or the crumbling of the Ottoman Empire, sometimes referred to as the sick man of Europe. So Russia, taking advantage of the crumbling of the Ottoman Empire in southeastern Europe, was making moves, much to the displeasure of the French, the English, and the Turks. As I say, there were 4 clasps for this medal: Alma, Inkerman, Balaclava, and Sebastopol, and that's the clasp you saw in Mole's medals. Okay, notwithstanding the major historical thread of the Crimean War, which we don't have time to go into in detail tonight, there are other things that were introduced. The first thing that was introduced in Crimea was the use of telegraph. Now, the use of the telegraph greatly enhanced communications. In fact, it reduced communications between Crimea and London to weeks rather than months when they were sent by sea. Okay, so this is William Russell. Now, William Russell was the first war correspondent in history, and he took advantage of that telegraph to send dispatches to London. And those dispatches talked about the appalling conditions in the trenches, and it also talked about the appalling medical service. There were many dying from medical problems that were from bullets. Now, that's Florence Nightingale. I think you've all heard of Florence. But it was the dispatches that were sent back and in the London Times that caused her to look at the appalling conditions and move herself and some of her nurses to the Crimea to try to sort it out. And this was the beginning of battlefield nursing that we know today. Next slide. Roger Fenton. Now, Roger Fenton was the first person to try to document a war in photographs. And he was very successful. And next slide. And here's an example of the British infantry in the Crimea. Therefore, even with a cursory glance at this medal, we see a number of threads that we can pull and carry out more historical research. In fact, if you go back to the Corps war correspondent, if you pulled his thread, the next place you'd find yourself is in the U.S. Civil War. He worked there extensively. He was a little bit Southerner appreciative, but he was finally asked to leave and go to England. Okay, let's go back to Mr. Mall, or Captain Mall. That's his name on the medal, and this is a major thread to our story. We're going to talk about his life. Next one. There we are. This is not Captain Wall, but this is a pretty good representation. This is your standard, or bog standard infantry officer in the Crimea. They're kind of a scruffy lot. Okay, a search of his records showed that he served at the 82nd Foot in the Crimea, and he fought in the final battle of Sebastopol, which essentially ended the war. He was born in France. He had 13 brothers and sisters. Only 3 did not survive to adulthood, and 7 of them were born in Canada. He was born to the Lieutenant Colonel Mall, John Mall, and his mother, who was Frances Amelia Jarvis. Now, next slide. Now, that name Jarvis should ring a bell. It's a major street in Toronto, and turned out that was the Jarvis. Now, there's quite an interesting story here. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about Stephen Jarvis. Stephen Jarvis was a loyalist who lived on a wealthy farm in Connecticut. At the beginning of the American Revolution, he initially fought with the American side because he's in a bit of a snit with his father. And after 6 months with the regiment in New York, he left and joined the British Army and continued throughout the Revolutionary War, fighting in New York, Charleston, and St. Augustine in Florida. After the war, he returned to Connecticut, brought his wife and his children to New Brunswick. So he's your typical United Empire loyalist. When he was living in New Brunswick, he was very popular, very successful, using patronage appointments as you'd expect. But he had a little bit of a problem, and he decided that he would leave and move west to a town called York. Along the way, he left his daughter in Quebec City, where she met and married Lieutenant Colonel Mall. So there are numerous threads of history here. First of all, we've got the U.S. Civil War with the United Empire Loyalists. We have York, Toronto. When he was in York, by the way, he fought in 1812 war, was captured and paroled by the Americans. After the 1812 war, he became a very successful person, a prominent family in Toronto, and gained many positions, postmaster, those sorts of jobs that are all patronage. He did very well. Now, following the, hang on for a minute here. Yeah, so following the Crimean War, Mall and his family, Robert Mall and his family moved to Toronto. And there, of course, they connected with their family, the Jarvis family, and Mall was appointed assistant sheriff, which is a position he held for the next 20 years. He died in 1894 and is buried at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. So the great references to there and great bit of history. Now, next slide. Kingston. I said we try to connect these to Kingston. And the cannon on the left is a Russian cannon from the fortress at Sebastopol. It used to stand with his partner in front of Sir John A. Macdonald's statue. And on the right, you can see the Russian eagle, the double-headed eagle, which is carved or etched into the barrel of cannon. But that's not the only thing that connects Kingston to the Crimean War. There are the streets in Kingston, Balaclava, Alma, and Napier. Those are all echoes of the past. Okay, next slide, Paul. Here's our second example. We're going to talk about Major Thomas Kelly of the 47th Frontenac Battalion of Infantry. Kelly was born of Irish parents in Portsmouth, just down the road, in 1847. And he's lived in that neighborhood. His father was a drayman, and he became a village clerk, and then later on a sessions clerk, traveling back and forth to Ottawa. Next slide. This is his house on Mowat Avenue, 55 Mowat. It's still there. And the photograph is courtesy of Jennifer McHenry. Next one. Now, these are the medals of Major Thomas Kelly. On the left is the 1866 Fenian Raid Medal, followed by the Northwest Canada Medal and the Long Service Medal. Now, there have been 2 campaigns in the Young Dominion of Canada. That's the Fenian Raid and the Northwest Canada, and Mall was served in both of those. Next one. Now, what was the Fenian Raids all about? Well, some Irish from England had a cunning plan that if they were to attack Canada, they could maybe hold cities like Toronto and Montreal as bargaining chips to the English to free Ireland. And of course, they had a ready supply of Irishmen in America. These Irishmen were well armed. They had fought in the Civil War, and many of them were unemployed. So they had the good potential there. So they decided on March the 17th, 1866, to invade Canada. Pardon me. Unfortunately, they forgot about it being winter, so they put it off till the summertime. Things like frozen ice made it hard to get across. Now, the Fenian campaign era caused a lot of problems in Canada. Many Irish Canadians weren't sure who they should be loyal to, but on the most part, they were loyal to Canada. Next one. Now, this is a picture of Thomas D'Arcy McGee. Now, D'Arcy McGee was obviously Irish. He was assassinated on his front steps in Ottawa by a known Fenian. Now, this caused a number of problems in Canada. First of all, we brought into existence the Dominion Police. Now, the Dominion Police, not a well-known organization, they were responsible for protecting the members of Parliament and doing intelligence work. They were disbanded in 1920 when they were taken over by the RCMP. The other thing, too, that the Fenian raid campaigns caused, and that was a great feeling of distrust of Americans. Now, that may sound familiar to you today, but really it helped that, and it was also one of the things that caused Confederation to come together. The maritime provinces realized that they couldn't survive on their own, so they needed to be part of a big country, and we can credit the Irish for that. Okay, now this shows his medals again, and we're talking about the Northwest Canada medal. That's the one in the middle, and it was distinctive ribbons. It sometimes came with a clap Saskatchewan. In this case, it does not. And Saskatchewan and the Northwest campaign was fought in 3 battles: Fish Creek, Cut Knife Hill, and Batoche. Next slide. Another map. This map shows the principal areas fought in the Northwest campaign, and places there. The ones in orange are modern day cities, and the ones in yellow are the main points of conflict. So what caused the 1885 campaign? Well, part of the reason was the transfer of land from Hudson's Bay Company to Canada and the disapportionment of that land and how it was done. The natives, the Métis, and the French there were not happy, and they seized upon this discontent, and Louis Riel ran a second uprising to establish a provincial government. He called upon those of French descent, First Nations peoples, and other discontented parties to support his case. The uprisings in Saskatchewan and Manitoba called up practically all of the Minnesotans in the country. Next slide. Now this is to show our picture rather of the Battle of Batoche. This was the final battle fought from May 9th to 12th, and in what then was called the provincial province of Saskatchewan. A greater number and superior firepower of Middleton's force eventually overwhelmed the Métis and the First Nation fighters. Now, next slide. Now, I thought I would include this because when I did the research through the Library and Archives Canada, I came across 2 things, or rather they sent me 2 things. One was the photograph we saw of Kelly at the beginning. And the second was a series of letters he wrote home. Now, they're fascinating letters, make great reading. I just have one here, and this is an interesting letter because it talks about, and it was a theme that went through most of his letters. He was worried about his wife not having enough money. And obviously they weren't paid when they were on duty. So he allowed her to take a loan, which is quite an interesting social statement. Okay, as we saw with Ball's medals and these medals, all of these take a story, tell a great story. The things like the photographs, the pictures, they all tell a narrative that's very personal. And of course, it also covers the narrative of the Victorian era. Okay, next slide. Now that is the main part of what I was going to talk about. If you indulge me, we can have a look at some other medals. Next slide. Now earlier, you should all recognize the one on the left. If I asked you, Don, what is that medal? You jump up and say that's the
Fenian medal.
Fenian medal, right. Did you pass those around, by the way?
Sure.
I just pass them in any order, Don, doesn't matter.
Okay. Start.
Now, when you look at the clasps on this, you see one for Fenian Raid 1866 and one for the Red River Campaign. And as you know, I'm a sucker for photographs, so this is a picture of Matthew Hunter, who was part of the battalion that went to Winnipeg in 1870. Now, this was an interesting campaign because it was led by Garnet Wolseley, and they couldn't go through the States because Americans weren't keen in having armed troops going on their country. So they had to go by rail to Collingwood and by steamer to Thunder Bay. And then they followed the old trading routes, the old trappers' routes through these rivers and waterfalls, and just terrible thing. And to do that successfully, they hired voyageurs, the men who had been on the fur trade. And they managed to get in the early spring all the way to Winnipeg without any casualties at all. Now, there's an interesting link here because Garnet Wolseley was very impressed with those Canadian voyageurs and what they could do. So next medal. Next. There we go. Now, this is the Nile medal, and it's the Nile medal for 1884, 1885. Now, Garnet Wolseley was asked to lead the British forces to relieve Gordon at Khartoum. And he said to himself, aha, there's two ways to do that. One through the desert, which is not very popular. The other way is to follow the Nile. But the Nile has all kinds of rapids in it. So he remembered 15 years earlier when he was in Canada about the voyageurs. So he had recruited 300 voyageurs to guide the British boats up the Nile to Khartoum. Now, unfortunately, they got there too late and Gordon was killed. I think you all know the story. But this is one of those boatmen, and it's boatman Tupan. Now, we think he spelled his name wrong, but he was illiterate, signed with an X. His name is probably Turpin. There are about 300 of these. Okay, another one. Now this is the medal to a fleet paymaster, William Parmenter. Now, I show this partly because of the photograph, which is a daguerreotype print or photograph that I had scanned and had colored by a friend of mine. And it's unique in that it shows him wearing the Syria medal. Now, the Syria medal is the one on the left, and that was one of the last campaign of the Naval General Service Medal in 1840. The one in the middle is the Baltic medal. That was a medal in the Crimea for the Navy that was in the Baltic, keeping the Russian fleet there. And the one on the end, that was a medal given out by the Turks because of the Crimea battles. Now, the last one. Now, one thing that most medal collectors don't like to talk about, but they are privately, and that's the crow factor. They like things that are shiny. And I show this one. First of all, the medal on the left is the relief of Peking, the 1900 Boxer Rebellion. This was made famous by the movie 55 Days at Peking with David Niven and Charlton Heston. And the other two are the standard war medals. But the one on the right, this is the crow factor, the bling. That is the Military Order of the Dragon, and that was given out by the Americans to their officers and also available to all the officers of the United Forces that were relieving Peking. And that was the Brits, French, the Germans, the Italians, and other smaller countries. So I thought you might like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that ends the talk. I hope I haven't been too long. No, 35 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Any questions?
Oh. Let me begin with a question, if I may.
Okay. Yeah.
What is the significance of the color and striping of the ribbons? Does it signify anything, or is it just for variety?
Most of the time, they didn't signify anything particular, but the China medal, those colors of yellow and scarlet are very much Chinese colors. The victory medal and the war medal, maybe you can answer that, Lou.
No, I'm not aware of any particular colors for the British War Medal and the Victory Medal. The Victory Medal, the water, silk, rainbow colors, when that ribbon was adapted for every country that participated in the Great War. It should a Victory Medal. They make an interesting collection of themselves, but the ribbons are all the same for every country that issued a Victory Medal for First World War. Why the rainbow colors? There were other earlier ribbons in the British system that were rainbow colors or multicolored.
Yep.
But there was no particular significance for that particular design.
Yeah. The only medals I know that have some significance are significant. And those are the World War II stars. And the rumor has it that the ribbons were designed by George VI. I don't have one handy, but if you look at the 3945 medal, it shows blue, gray, and dark red. And so that's Army, Navy, Air Force, and so on and through. The Italian star has got the green and the white stripes, which is a typical Italian colors.
They call it the rainbow because it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet from the center both ways.
Yeah.
That's why it's called the rainbow.
Yeah.
Warren, Betty,
What was the dragon medal given for?
what was the Dragon Medal given for?
Okay, the Dragon Medal was given out by the U.S. Army to all its officers who fought in the relief of Peking. But they also offered it to all the officers of the other countries that were there. And many took advantage of it, and they're named on the back.
Warren, how did armies validate who got the medals? Was there a committee, or was it off the muster list, or?
That's a good question. Thanks, Duncan. Well, I think there were certainly from muster lists, but there is a number of ways, and also people could apply for them. But, yes.
I was wondering what happens if a soldier dies on campaign? Does family get a medal?
If a soldier died on campaign, did the family therefore get the medal?
Many of them could apply for them. The Waterloo medal I showed you, it was initially, there were 36,000 of those issued. They were not intended to be issued to the families, but some family members did petition their regiments and they were awarded.
Deborah has a question online.
Deborah, please go ahead.
Was there a list kept of the men or women that were given medals, the various medals over the years? Or would you have to just look at their records?
Could you repeat that, please?
Was there a list made of who got the medals and what they got?
Yeah, for the most part, there are nominal rolls and medal rolls that do identify the people. And then, of course, in Canada, you can go to Library and Archives Canada and look into their First World War medals and other rolls. They'll let you know them.
Thank you.
Did anyone ever have a medal removed from them?
Well, no, that's an even excellent question. I don't know specifically of anyone who was committed such a crime that they lost their medals. It did happen, and Lou again might have a better idea. But for the most part, drunkenness, crimes of robbery, and that sort of stuff didn't result in having your medals taken back. But some cases, depending how heinous the crime was, they did. I think there was the odd Victoria Cross winner who, after he got the VC, did something bad enough to have it removed.
I was wondering more by accident. Who we're supposed to get that?
Oh, I see. Well, that's an even more interesting question. I think if you were, I don't think you'd get it by accident. I can't imagine a scenario where that would be.
Like the Olympics.
Oh,
There was the famous case going ahead of it in World War I when the aviator Billy Bishop was said to have raided a German squadron on the ground early in the morning and was gloriously rewarded for this. He became a war hero. But it's come to light that it may not have happened. There was, for instance, with the Victoria Cross, a validation process, as you know, that a number of people had to record and validate the act of heroism.
Yep.
No one saw what the Bishop did. And now that we're into the German archives, there's not much record that the Germans said this guy came and dealt us a hell of a blow. So there is controversy around this.
yeah, but it made for a good war story. Yeah, they had to, generally the rule was you had to be, somebody had to see you do it. Generally, a general officer had to recommend something like a Victoria Cross. And there were other requirements, like people had to state what they saw you did and that sort of stuff. Yes, Luke.
There's, I'm not aware of any, as Warren said, where medals have been returned or withdrawn as a result. But there are lots of cases where people have applied for medals that they weren't entitled to, or that they didn't get and thought they should have had. And whether it was a gallantry decoration or something else. And the histories of regimental histories and the whole medal business is full of things like that. People who thought they should have been entitled to various awards and they didn't get one, and carried that as a lip on for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, some of those people, one I think showed up at the November 11th ceremony in Ottawa, all decked out with whole kinds of medals that, of course, he didn't apply for and or didn't earn. And the ones usually got them was when they had some sort of bravery medal.
Yeah.
The sort of run-of-the-mill campaign stars and stuff, generally. Yes.
So something like the Waterloo medal, where I think you said there were 36,000 of them.
Yes.
So today, do you have an idea of how rare those medals are?
How rare are some of these medals?
Well, definitely that medal is rare. I think it's being passed around right now. It's over 200 years old today. I don't think Lou's got his hand up.
The current market for a Waterloo medal is around $5,000 Canadian.
So turn it back in.
Well, Lou makes a good point. Rarity is often signified by value.
That brings up a kind of ethical question, it seems to me, in dealing with metals in a market system where the price goes up and down according to scarcity or what are the ethics of this? When you visit the Imperial War Museum in London on the top floor, they have a whole floor dedicated to the VC and the George Cross, and it's subsidized by Lord Shorecroft.
No, that's close enough, yeah.
An English lord who made the point that he was disturbed seeing these medals come to auction. And of course, the VC and the GC commanded a good deal of money, and some of them were going out of the country. So he has bought up over 450 of them now, and they're now on the top floor, each one with a record of how it was won, etc. But it's the ethical question of these were awarded for a sacred purpose. Should someone capitalize on that?
Well, to start with, the Lord Ashcroft's Ashcroft, yeah, his gallery has been closed. The War Museum, the Imperial War Museum, wanted to have something more contemporary, so they closed it down.
Really?
Yeah, it did. Now the Victoria Cross becomes one of those medals which you could call a national treasure. Should it be exported and sold? Well, I don't think so. Not for the Victoria Cross. I actually held one, Second War one. It went up for auction, and they fetch prices between $500,000 and $700,000. So, oh yeah. So, is there an ethical issue? It's hard to say. People's family, they come at some point down the line, 2 or 3 generations later. They say, "What are we going to do with Grandpa's medal?" Well, we know it's worth a lot of money. We don't want to hold on to it because if somebody finds out, it's going to get stolen. So what should we do? And in the case of the last one, and I wish I could remember his name, one of the Hill 70 people, they offered it to the Canadian War Museum, and our group raised about 50% of the value for that presentation. But when you come further down the line, campaign medals, World War II, World War I medals, the one thing that collectors say is that they're custodians, and they hang on to these. They do what I do. They research them, and then they pass them on to the next collector. They're still showing up in the melting pots. The silver value of a war medal, is a single war medal that no connection, no one knows who it is. They're melted down.
Chief Baxter has a question online.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a medal here. I'm wondering if you give me any information about it.
Well, thanks,
The
Gene.
camera's over there, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Gene.
Okay,
Paul sent me that medal, or a photograph of that medal, and I did answer you, didn't I, Paul?
Yes, you did.
So perhaps the answer didn't get to you, Gene, but that's called a Memorial Cross, the Canadian Memorial Cross, referred to often as a Mother's Cross. And on the back of that medal is the name of the person, and it escapes me, but his service number is there. And if you go into the Library and Archives Canada to Soldiers of the First War, type in his service number, and his whole career will come up. In fact, I did.
I did do that. I did go to that number, and it gave me his form when he enlisted. That's all it gave me.
Well, that's his attestation papers. Further down on that site, there's a link to his rest of his papers. But so that's
okay.
what that medal is.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for that more.
Yeah. I think there's a question back here again.
In Canada, is it illegal to wear a medal that you're not entitled to wear?
In Canada, is it illegal to wear a medal that you're not entitled to wear?
Yes. Now, the punishment for it is very, very mild, but yeah, you're not supposed to wear them. Yeah. Okay.
It's in the criminal code.
It is.
Yes.
Is it criminal?
It's a what?
It's in the criminal code.
It's a criminal code
Not
offense.
just a-
Yes.
Yeah.
some arbitrary regulation.
It's not just a bylaw. Yeah.
It's interesting, in the recent years, we've chosen to commemorate the sacrifice that mothers paid in war. And of course, they get a silver cross now.
Yep.
It's very appropriate rather than a bouquet of flowers, or maybe they get that as well, but,
Well, that memorial cross that Gene showed, that was instituted by Canada in World War I and continued and used by Canada in World War II. I think the New Zealanders got into it in World War I. I can't be sure of that. Now, of course, they expanded who can have that medal. It used to be for the mothers or the wife, but now they can actually, I think, designate up to 5. I think, is that right, Lou? 5 or 3?
It's a number of.
Yeah, 3. Yeah. So they can, to your mother, your brother, and your father, that sort of idea. Yeah.
I advocate for the fathers, as per my talk a month ago.
Yes, a couple of comments more on what has come up here. The comment about an act of bravery has to be witnessed. A lot of you know the story of Lawrence of Arabia, who received no gallantry medals because he was always by himself. The other comment on withdrawing of medals, I can give you a case of a Kingston man who enlisted in 1914, was completely in trouble right from the start, got to England and finally was jailed there by the army and sent back, and written on his papers in Ottawa is this man is to receive no medals. So he came back, and 2 years later, when we were somewhat in need of more soldiers, he re-enlisted, went on leave before he was to be shipped overseas, committed suicide during that leave and got his medals at the end of the war, or his family did. So I think probably that by the end of the war, all this about, oh, Jim's not getting medals because had been forgotten.
That's a very interesting story. I wasn't aware of that one.
Any other questions? Betty?
Is there a special department in charge of who gets medals and giving them? There must be
Yes.
a special.
Is there a special department in charge of getting medals?
Yeah, in Canada, it's a heritage department, I believe. Lou, do you remember the proper name?
History and heritage,
History and Heritage, yeah,
or honors and awards.
honors and awards.
I
But
changed the name, it's a bureaucracy.
I believe there's a warehouse or a room in Ottawa with hundreds of thousands of medals that have not been collected. That you, if you're the family and prove it, you can go and get the medals.
I'm not familiar. I don't think so. Not hundreds of thousands, anyways. No, I don't believe they are. I think there used to be an opportunity where you could get ribbons from different wars, but Veterans Affairs Canada would have them. But,
I'm not aware of any store.
Yeah.
There are unissued medals. For example,
You need to like.
when in the last couple of years, the sovereign has changed, and the sovereign on the medals will change. Same as on our coins and banknotes. And it takes about 3 or 4 years for that to work through the system. I have, almost everybody who's been in the Canadian Forces has a Canadian Forces decoration, a CD, and they're still issuing Elizabethan CD. I've seen a Charles III CD, but I haven't actually handled one that's been issued to somebody. Because one of my chums is involved in the metal business in Ottawa. So it takes a while for that. But what they'll do, because it costs money to produce these things, they'll issue the unexploded stock until they're gone. And I have had occasion where I've had a question where I had a group of medals from somebody, and he didn't have a long service medal. So I wrote off on his behalf and inquired about that, and they issued one. But it may not have been the one he was entitled to. There was a later, I'm thinking of my father-in-law's efficiency medal, which he never applied for. But I got him one, and it was an Elizabethan one, not a King George VI medal. So they had used up the George VI medals and that sort of thing, and that's happened a lot. So there's some, but there might be a shoebox full of stuff, but not a warehouse.
Paul, if we go back, no, it's not on anywhere.
No, do you want it?
No, I was just going to say, just back to Kelly. Kelly had 3 medals: the Fenian Raid Medal, the Northwest Canada Medal, and the Long Service Medal, Colonial Auxiliary Forces Long Service Decoration. That was Queen Victoria's cipher on it. He received that medal after she had died, and before they had produced one for Everett VII.
If you've ever worked in the National Archives in Ottawa, you'll know that the records of the military are all kept in Ottawa out at Tunney's Pasture, and you can order up either your own military record or that of someone in your family. There's certain conditions the person has to be dead, and it's very moving in the archives in the reading room when they bring these boxes in. They're blue box, like a tote box, which has the record of the person. And this often happens around Remembrance Day when there are a lot of vets in town and they've ordered this in advance, and you see them opening this box. And there is the whole life of their service member, from the attestation paper to the pension benefits at the end. Some are more complete than others. And they warn people, be aware that what you think your relative did and what they told you they did may not jive with the kind of reports you're going to read. So it's a very moving experience. And if any of you have military records, go to the LAC website and you can see the process whereby you order this. You have to order it a little in advance because they have to retrieve it and bring it in. But it's really quite an emotional journey that you go on. And the medal citations would be in there, along with all sorts of other things, you know, got VD in France, that sort of thing. It's all there.
Yeah, the medical records are pretty extensive. I probably shouldn't tell this story, but my mother's grandfather, who fought in World War, he fought in South Africa, didn't serve in the First War, but he retired in 1905. And it lists on the British records the names of all the wives and children, and none of them were the wife that he was living with. I thought my grandmother would be keen to know that, but she was not.
One more question.
For instance, for the campaign medals that went to rank and file, so to speak, how did these individuals come into possession of those medals? I mean, in some cases, were they presented the medal? Did they have to go and pick it up somewhere, or that kind of thing?
What was the delivery process for a campaign medal if you were entitled to one?
Well, some of the regiments where the medals were handed out to them as part of a regiment. The U.S. or Royal Navy ships that came back to England after the Crimea, their medals would be issued to them there. Many people, though, had to apply through a written document, and they were mailed to them.
There was also, I think, a public relations opportunity for the state, let's call it that, to have the king present medals. It demonstrated the moral purpose, they thought, of the war, pinning it on, and we still see that. That's not to diminish the sacrifice of the person involved, but there was an other purpose involved in boosting morale, keeping the home front aware of what was going on.
Is there any way you could find out whether a family member had got a medal or not? Was there any way that you could find out if a family member had not received a medal?
Now, is it your family?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what age this person would be, but did he serve?
He served in World War I.
Oh, yes. Well, that you just go into Libraries Archives Canada and go to Soldiers of the Great War, and you can type in his name, his rank, or his service number, much what Gene did. Yeah, if you go through that, you'll find out what medals he was entitled to. And now, mind you, if his last name is Smith, it's a long journey.
His last name was Lake, L-A-K-E.
Well, that might be a little bit shorter. First name, but you type it in, and it'll eventually you work your way through all the lakes until you find somebody that looks like it's your relative. And often, the way to solve that ambiguity is look at the attestation papers and see if they were born in your hometown or near your hometown, or they were born in Vancouver, and that's not the same person. Yes.
Was there any particular location, such as a depository, to where medals were produced, and could there have been a connection to the Royal Canadian Mint?
Well, originally the Canadian medals were produced by the Mint. Later on in the 70s, I think 70s or 80s, they were farmed out to various companies. When you look at the quality of some of the later medals, you can see how poor quality they are. But they improved again, and now they're putting on a pretty fancy medal.
Mention has been made of these attestation papers. They were an original document when you were enlisting, where you were attested to by a doctor's investigation of you, and so your height, anything wrong with you, your background, that you were a 19-year-old stone mason or whatever, kind of a character reference. So you can get this, as Warren has said, by simply going to the LAC website and clicking on Soldiers of the First World War and running names that you know. If you happen to know the service number of the person, that really helps. But if nothing else, you can read other people who aren't related to you, and you get a real flavor of who went to war. A lot of people were, of course, lying or misrepresenting themselves. That's why the doctor was there to some degree. So the attestation papers are fabulous. There must be, what, 200,000?
Well, certainly there's 100,000 plus for the first war. Yeah, they are interesting. You find out, like my grandfather who served in the first war said he was a sniper in France. And now my grandparents were American, but he served in the Canadian Army. So when I finally got his attestation papers, lo and behold, I discovered two things. One, he was a conscript. And the second was he arrived in France on November the 12th, 1918.
Did he kill anybody?
No. But he was involved in the riots in Ireland. But when we were kids, it was a great story. And of course, he was telling the story of Sergeant York.
Lou, I'm going to call on Lou Grimshaw, former president of the Society and a military antiquities collector, to thank our speaker.
Well, thanks very much, Duncan. I'm delighted to be able to thank Warren for this. Warren and I have been medal collectors for longer than we've been in Kingston.
Come into the picture.
Oh, okay. I'm not interested in being in the picture, but anyway.
Well,
they
are.
It's for the,
I'm out of the picture most of the time.
it's for the doomers, yeah.
But that's an interesting discussion, and particularly at this time, or the most recent years. We've been at this for long enough that we've seen how society has changed their attitudes towards veterans and medals and military service and that sort of military history, for that matter, over time. And these things are the medals themselves. I like to say to people, they're history you can hold in your hand, and they all represent something, even the most routine, I was there kind of medal. And the crown is the font of all honor. And so these things are the awards of the nation for some kind of service, either participation or a distinguished service or long service or whatever. And so they're important, and they're a lot more important today because of the interest that schools have taken in having students research veterans using the Library and Archives Canada website and so on, and looking at tombstones in the cemeteries in every town and cenotaph. And there's a lot more appreciation in more recent years. I can remember, we talked about rarity and value at one point. Some years ago, when I started out in this business, one could buy either in pawn shops or various, secondhand shops, antique stores, a pair of First World War medals, the Victory and the British War Medal, for less than the cost of a case of beer. $20, $25. Well, they're a little more than that now. But I'm glad for that, because they are much more significant. As I had the experience on one occasion, a man's medals were described as part of his, as part of Dad's old army junk that was being consigned to the dump, and fortunately was recovered from that. But if they're important, and they'll become if they're looked after. We do a lot of mounting of medals and putting them in shadow boxes and things like that. They become heirlooms for the family. It may be the only link they have to their family histories. But they do exist. I've done Crimean War medals for people for their some ancestor and that sort of thing, not just the current survey people. But anyway, that was an interesting discussion, Warren. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And
Very kind words.
a little token from the society.
Oh, thank you, society. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes. I just want to pick up on one thing that Lou said about school students. Hill 70, which I'm still a member of the board, is working with the Upper Canada District School Board. And last year and this year, we have funded a trip for about 15 of them to go over, look at the battlefield sites. And I can tell you that those kids that go over there come back changed. They're quite different. And it's wonderful to see how they do change. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you again, Warren. Thank you. Just remind our members that our next lecture is on Wednesday, the 21st of January, when Dr. Dave Gordon from the Urban Studies and Regional Planning School of Queens will be here to talk to us about Kingston's North End district. All the lectures for next year will be posted on our website right from January on through to November. So wish you a Merry Christmas and look forward to seeing people in January.
No, thank you very much again from all of the society. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all who've been part of this year. And if you want to come here in December, you can, but we won't be here, as Duncan says, until January. I was going to add one comment there, Warren, which is a sad note, actually, to the end of your talk. Somebody asked about how the medals were presented. With the vast numbers at the end of the Second World War, I noticed in Paul's presentation last month, and the same thing happened with my father, they arrived in a little cardboard box about 3 years later.
Yeah.
That was it. Medals, ribbons, put them together yourself. And a nice note from the king, and I don't think it was his actual signature on the piece of paper. And not only that, but a very strange bit of tissue paper which explain which medals you're actually being given, as if you didn't know whether you'd been in Europe or Africa or wherever. I presume that was because of the numbers that were being awarded. I don't know what happened in Canada, but certainly in the First World War here in Kingston, one of the great days in 1921 was Prince of Wales, later Everett the 8th, on the cricket field, presenting the medals to everybody from the 21st Battalion, including Nan the goat mascot, whom he'd known in the trenches. So, as Duncan said, is Christmas coming up already? Happy New Year.